what am I going to talk to you about? Well, I want to talk about smart home in general, and more importantly, the fact that this is a new revenue opportunity for resellers, support workers, and IT procurement businesses such as all of you. And hopefully something you'll see here today will resonate and give you some ideas about how smart home could be a new business model and a new revenue for you. What I'm going to talk about is, let's get some basics out of the way. What is smart home? The fact that we're actually trying to engage in a new level of smart. So smart home is actually nothing new. It's been around for decades, though previously the preserve of footballers' mansions and Vegas hotel rooms, clearly not accessible to the man in the street. We'll cover off a little bit about the Internet of Things, or IoT, and what today's smart home, based on those technologies, looks like. How the new revenue stream can be monetized by people such as yourselves, and then smart home as standard. And what I mean by that really is, at some point smart home will be the norm. 10 years ago the iPhone launched, and before that we'd never seen an app. They didn't exist. Now we use them for our banking, we use them to do our grocery shopping, we use them to communicate with our friends and organise our social lives. What would we do without them? And my view of the industry is that in 10 years' time that will be the same for smart home. And people will be asking questions like, how did you turn your heating on before smart heating? I went up to the airing cupboard and pressed the button. You did what? But that's the kind of things that the transition that we're going through, and we'll cover that as well. Okay, so what is a smart home? A smart home essentially is a collective of devices that work together as one to enable the home to be connected to the internet, to take advantage of information from external sources such as the internet, and to be able to interact with the homeowner in a positive way. So that's a very brief description of what smart home is. Of course, it means different things to different people, and there are different pillars, if you like, within smart home, such as heating control, lighting control, energy saving, that people will naturally gravitate to. But all of those things come together to mean smart home. So some of the brands that play in today's smart home, you'll be familiar with all of those, I imagine. My brand is My Home, part of Energenie. IFTTT, does anybody know what that stands for? If then that. That's it, yep, if this then that. So if something happens, then I want this to be the outcome. Amazon Echo, a new product that launched in the UK about a year ago now, in the States a couple of years before that, and it's really sort of set the smart home market alight, to be honest. It's been responsible for a huge amount of growth, and they've sold over 3 million of those in the UK. Nest is owned by Google, if you didn't know that, and they're a platform partner of ours, and one of the main protagonists of the IoT smart home. Hue is a Philips brand, lighting, and Arlo's a Netgear brand. And Arlo's a range of wireless cameras, if you didn't know or haven't seen it. Smart home of old. So this is what I mean by the systems that were in your Vegas hotel room and the footballer mansions. They are expensive. I think that's the headline. They require professional installation, often with rewiring. So that's okay if you're putting it in a new build, but if you're putting it to a retrofit into an existing property, then that can be very expensive, because you've got to take the place apart and then put it back together again afterwards. So there's a lot of rectification works to do afterwards. Programming of the functions would be carried out by a technician on site. It certainly wouldn't ever be carried out by the system user, i.e. the homeowner. So therefore it's expensive to train and upskill installers to carry out those tasks, because they're quite complicated. They're unique to a single system, i.e. they're proprietary. They're not generic across other platforms. And the actual devices themselves are expensive, because they tend to have the logic on board. So they have something that would resemble a server maybe in the home, but certainly they are expensive devices to actually manufacture and therefore install as well. Okay, a new kind of smart. So this is what I mean by smart home of today or the future, and these are the Internet of Things smart homes. So they tend to have wire-free solutions, and I simply mean that you don't have to run Cat5, Cat6 data cables around the property anymore. The devices just communicate with one another and back to the internet via a radio platform. And the radio platforms are varied. Some of them use 433 megahertz, some of them use 868, some of them use Wi-Fi 2.45 gigahertz, but however they're doing it, they just don't require to be wired together. So that's a huge cost saving straight away. The devices themselves become low cost because by and large the intelligence isn't in the devices. They're actually fairly dumb devices in a lot of cases. They're just there to carry out a physical function. And because of that, they're actually very simple to set up. So in a lot of cases, the user can set them up if they've got a little bit of technical know-how. But of course, a lot of people either are too busy to do that, don't want to do that, or don't have the technical know-how. So therefore, they would turn to a professional for advice, assistance, and maybe that done for me element. And we'll come on to that a little bit later because that is actually an opportunity, not a barrier. And as I say, the new kind of smart, all the logic, the smart stuff is actually in the cloud. So the end devices are actually fairly straightforward and dumb. As long as they can communicate with the cloud, then they can get their information, their control platforms. And of course, you can make changes to everything in the cloud. It doesn't have to be done to the device itself. It can just be done on a mobile phone or a PC, wherever you are. So that brings us on to how those work, the Internet of Things. Here are some typical Internet of Things logos that you will have seen. Zigbee and Z-Wave are probably two of the largest platforms, and what they are is actually a standard that different manufacturers put products on to build around that standard. So they all work together, interoperability, but only within their ecosystem. So Zigbee only works with Zigbee, Z-Wave only works with Z-Wave. Samsung's SmartThings platform is another one, and of course our good friend Wi-Fi. So there's plenty of consumer devices that you can pick up from Currys or John Lewis, etc., that are just using Wi-Fi, and they tend to be at the very cheaper end of the market and usually quite simple single function products, but they are a smart home product. So today's smart home. So before I sort of go into exactly what people are looking for, today's smart home in the UK, there's around about 4 million homes that have a smart device right now as of today. And that's out of a housing stock of around 24 million homes, okay? But we're still at a fairly early stage. What's really interesting though, is that those devices that people have bought, they've had an average cost of around £256. So it's not people that have tried a smart plug for 20 quid that they've bought off of Amazon, right? This is considered products that people have spent, you know, a couple of hundred quid plus on, right? So there is a significant opportunity in this market. You're not playing for, you know, a 20, 30 quid one-off sale, okay? In terms of the value of the smart home market, in the UK in 2016, it was just over 1.4 billion. And it was around about 10 times that in the US, okay? But actually 2015 is the last global figure that's available, and it was 10 billion. And PricewaterhouseCoopers have done their forecast model to take it through to 2020 globally, 150 billion pounds. So that is a 15-fold increase in 5 years. So that gives you an idea of the scale, 15-fold increase in just 5 years. So this is a huge opportunity. Yeah, this is the new smartphone, or it is the new, you know, this is a very big opportunity that is going to happen whether people want it to or not. It's in motion, it's not going to stop. But today's smart home breaks down like this. This is really the important bit in terms of where we in this room are likely to be finding revenue from. So at the top of the pyramid, a very small amount of sales, but high value sales. And that's the Pro channel. So that's your Vegas hotel room stuff. And they're brands like Crestron, Control 4, Lutron, very specialist products, all of that technical knowledge, and they require professional installation with training and specialist equipment to install it as well. Just under that is semi-pro products, and our range crosses over a little bit into that. But those are products that would be able to be installed by a qualified electrician or qualified plumber. Possibly even a handyman for some of them that don't actually require a formal qualification, but they're not really DIY products because they require, you know, a proper toolkit and a degree of competence when installing them. And then you've got DIY have-a-go products. So a lot of our products fall into that category. And what I'm talking about there is the stuff that you could, you know, typically buy from, you know, a DIY stockist or an IT supplier, take them home, have a crack at it, and, you know, mostly succeed. But you may need to ring for support, or in the end you may need to get somebody to come and rescue you. And then at the bottom you've got plug and play products from retail stores. And the pyramid essentially just reflects that the lower down you go, the more sales opportunity there is. So these devices will outsell those devices, will outsell those devices, will outsell those devices. But obviously with the expanding base of the pyramid, the sales pyramid, the value in terms of the product itself goes down, but that doesn't mean the value in terms of the proposition goes down, as I'll come on to. So this area here has other revenue streams attached to it other than just selling the physical product itself. And I'll, as I say, I'll explain a little bit more about that as we move on. So, selling hardware is not the end. So what can we do to add to the margin that we make on selling a smart home product? So, customization. Now, as well as the actual products themselves, there are a number of services that attach to smart home. All of the platform products that we work with have functionality that we call organic functionality, i.e. they can do stuff within their own ecosystem. But many products also take it outside of the ecosystem. And we talked very briefly about IFTTT, if this then that. So that platform allows you to join up different smart home products from different manufacturers and make them work together. Now, a lot of users, end users, will be very happy to set up a program timer or a simple rule within the native application or the native platform of the product that they've bought. But would they be comfortable to go outside of that and try and join that product to another manufacturer's product via a third party? And in a lot of cases, the answer is no. Now, IFTTT is just one of a number of growing third parties that are trying to unify the smart home product market, if you like. Another is Stringify, and while IFTTT means if this then that, Stringify allows you to add other protocols and parameters as well. So not just if this is happening, then do that, but if this is happening and that is happening and the other is happening, then do that. So it can bring in all new variables. For example, you could run a heating schedule that only comes on if you're within a certain radius of your home, and if the weather is only of a certain condition, and if it's at a certain time of the day. So you can put more and more parameters in to ensure that the smart home behaves exactly as the end user wants it to. And actually, that is customization, and that is something that should be a paid service. So as well as selling a group of products to a consumer, you can customize those products so that they work to the customer's brief, and you can monetize that. Installation. So there are certain products that you would need a particular qualification for. So for example, if you have to attach anything to a boiler, you need to be gas safe registered. So that's possibly not an option here, but you may know somebody that is, or you may work with installers that have that ability. But a lot of products actually don't require any qualification to install, particularly on the electrical side of things, because they're retrofit products. You're just changing a light switch for a light switch, or a plug socket for a plug socket. Just because it's a smart plug socket, it's no more difficult to install than a standard one, and it requires no qualification to do that. So while there might be a little bit of initial upskilling, it's certainly not paid training courses, and it's certainly not sign-off and certification. They're fairly rudimentary skills that if you don't want to tackle yourselves, you may outsource. But again, there's a good revenue stream to be made from offering this product in a box, costs this much, this product installed into your home costs this much. And then maintenance. How many of you here offer support packages or maintenance plans with kit that you sell? Yep, so a fair few of you on that side of the room at least, anyway. So smart home is going to be no different. And you know, we're right at day one at the moment, to be brutally honest. And this maintenance network is yet to exist, right? The majority of IoT smart home products that have been sold in retail, to be quite frank. And it's really only now that we're starting to get the sort of semi-pro products coming through that require installation. Now, once you've installed something, you can then offer to maintain it for the same client. So, first and foremost, you may offer a simple monthly recurring charge that allows for an annual visit. And that could be changing the batteries in sensors or in radiator valves, in thermostats. It could be cancelling programs that are no longer required, adding new programs, adding new levels of customization, and indeed adding new products that have been launched into the market since you last saw that customer. So you could create a whole plan around offering that kind of support or maintenance and get a monthly revenue, and in which most months you'll actually do absolutely nothing for it. Just the same as British Gas offer boiler care for £10 a month, and in 11 out of 12 months of the year they'll do absolutely nothing for it. How do we achieve a sustainable smart home business? And I think this is also really pertinent because we are really, as I keep saying, at day one. And to that end, I think the key is to start small. And when you're talking to customers about what kind of smart home products they want, they would usually understand one thing about it. I want to control my heating from my smartphone, for example, is a really obvious one. I want to be able to turn my lights on and off when I'm not there for security. I want to know if the house is secure. They're fairly simple missions to achieve, and actually telling somebody that you can do that for a fairly small amount of money is a really good way to get their interest. But the key bit is you've then got them into the system, and in most cases smart home systems have modularity. So just because somebody has entered a platform from one angle, from a small start, it doesn't mean that that's where they're going to finish. In fact, the likelihood is once they've seen the benefits of the smart home kit that they wanted to start with, they're more than likely going to come back to you and see what else you've got to offer, because they start to enjoy it, they start to use it, and they start to realise the benefits of having it. There are pretty much always going to be new products to upsell. Again, we're still in an early stage of smart home, so there's lots more products coming to market on a regular basis, and once you've got a customer that's into your smart home system, you can offer them new things. And that doesn't just mean from one manufacturer, by the way. That could be from a whole different range of manufacturers. As I say before, the manufacturers' products can all be joined together in the cloud. That's the benefit of IoT smart home. So you'll always have something else to sell to people and talk to people about. The other thing that I get asked a lot about is what happens when new functions and features become available. And in smart home of old, when something needed to be updated or changed, you'd have to get your engineer back round to do it. Whereas most manufacturers now simply send over-the-air updates and can add new functions to products. Probably the best known company for doing that is actually not a smart home company, but it's an automotive company called Tesla. You all heard of Tesla? So Elon Musk's company, when they launch a vehicle, it's got a certain version of firmware, and actually the capabilities of the vehicle are dialed right down, right? Well, depending on how much you've paid for the car anyway, right? So if you've paid for a basic model, it will perform in a certain way. If you're actually a bit disappointed that you didn't get a faster model or a higher model, that's fine. You can just ring up Tesla, and for another 10 grand, they'll dial up the speed a little bit for you. Because the car is always being capable of top speed. It's just you've paid for the one that's just been turned down a little bit. So over-the-air updates are actually an incredibly common way of now managing people's interaction and experience of a product. And a product can be either enhanced or restricted based on what level of service somebody is paying for. Interoperability of ranges is absolutely key. Many years ago, I say that, 3 years ago, everybody assumed that a smart home standard would win out. And sort of back in the 80s, there was the VHS versus Betamax race. For the younger ones, there's Blu-ray versus HD DVD race, and typically, one standard won out, VHS and then Blu-ray. Everybody expected the same to happen with smart home. So people were saying, is it going to be Zigbee? Is it going to be Z-Wave? Is it going to be, something else like Wi-Fi, right? But actually, that convergence of standards for smart home hasn't happened. In fact, actually, the opposite's happened. It's diverged. So more and more manufacturers have entered the marketplace with their own standard. And that's absolutely fine because we can join everything together in the cloud as long as they are open source. And that's really something that I would ask you to take away. That's check that products that you begin to stock will work with other products. And it's very easy to find out that information from the manufacturer's website. Look out for logos like Amazon Alexa, look out for IFTTT, look out for Stringify, look out for works with Nest. And if those aren't evident, then you need to ask the questions why. Because the fact is that could be a fairly closed system and could be disappointing, whereas a platform that works with lots of different standards is very open, very easy to engage with, and more importantly for you, very easy to sell other products into, right? Because they definitely will all work together if they're all participating in those platforms. So in terms of how we can show off smart home to potential customers, obviously online is a very simple way of doing it because rich content now, how-to videos, they're very easily available, easy to host, and they're well watched. And there's absolutely tons of stuff on YouTube about smart home that have got unbelievable numbers of views. And it's just a guy, just a regular person who's set up Amazon Alexa and a couple of light switches or light bulbs, shown how they've done it on YouTube, made a minute video, and it's got 350,000 views, right? Because people come to it because they don't really know what's going on and they want to watch somebody actually sit there and do it in front of them. It is surprisingly easy. In terms of presenting it in store, there's lots of assets and materials available. Most manufacturers have some kind of in-store POS, brochures, catalogues, point of sale, dummy units, display units, all of that. And that's really conversation starters, right? Because most people, as I say, are coming to smart home with one particular mission in mind. And what they really need to have is a bit of education in terms of what actually is possible. So it could be that they walk into a store expecting to buy one thing for a couple of £100 maybe, and walk out, £1,000 worse off, but a whole smart home system is going to be winging its way to them very shortly. So smart home as standard. This is a very interesting point, and that's that the major house builders, Carla, Taylor Wimpey, Redrow, etc., they are now looking at putting smart home into their houses, either by saying it's an upgrade. So if you're buying an unbuilt house off plan, you can choose your level of finish usually. You can choose what worktop that comes in the kitchen, and you can choose what colour light switches and sockets you have. So they're offering smart sockets and switches as an option. But actually, all of those house builders have told us that over the coming couple of years, they will be actually just putting it in as standard, this smart home as standard. Now, the minute that begins to happen, that's when the really interesting part of the retrofit market will kick off, because everyone that buys a new house will be showing off that they've got a smart home. And of course, that then makes everybody else who hasn't got a new house want a smart home, and that's the retrofit market. I think last year in the UK, these companies built just over 300,000 houses, and there's 24 million houses that exist at the moment. So it's easy to see which the biggest market share is likely to be. So while they're driving the smart home adoption, actually the retrofit market is the market to be playing in, because it's the much bigger market. And people who are looking to retrofit smart home to their existing property are likely to turn to IT specialists, they're likely to turn to electricians, and they're likely to turn to other people to do it for them, right? And okay, there's a bit of DIY in there as well, and a bit of plug and play stuff too. But really the plug and play market is the hook. It gets people into smart home. It's the installed stuff that adds value to the property that people will gravitate to in the longer term. So there we go, 24 million properties that are not smart. And also, just that definition of smart that's particularly relevant to your business as well. Smart home products take a pretty broad spectrum, actually. And while, as a manufacturer of smart home, I talk a lot about controlling your heating, lighting, and power and security, actually a lot of products that IT resellers sell every day can be considered smart home products. So if you sell NAS drives, if you sell Wi-Fi range extenders, if you sell power line, all of those really are part of the connected home, are they not? So actually you're already doing a bit of smart home anyway. And there's a good opportunity to start to bring collective bundles of services together, saying, right, package 1 will sort out your Wi-Fi in your property. Package 2 will sort out media streaming or storage and data in your property. Package 3 will sort out lighting in your property. Package 4 will sort out heating in your property. So there's actually a whole diverse ecosystem of smart home products that you may not have considered as smart home products, but actually they are. And actually the end user will see them as smart home products. And putting those together into a full offer is really what the industry needs. And actually that's really where the big money is going to be made, by offering that full diverse range of smart home products. Thank you very much for listening. We've got some time for some questions if you want to ask me any in here, and if not, then we can do that elsewhere.
Yeah, you mentioned devices supporting open source.
Yes.
What are the main open source programs or repos or whatever out there that are being used at the moment?
Yeah, so open source essentially is anything that is in the public domain that doesn't require either a manufacturing license or a specialist component. So if I start by answering ones that are closed systems, so for example, the Z-Wave Alliance, right, is as it sounds, it's an alliance of manufacturers that have commonality. Zigbee take a different approach, and you have to have a Zigbee chip in your product. And they're manufactured by one manufacturer and under license from Zigbee. So a bit like Apple, when they tell you that their proprietary connector, the Lightning connector, can only be made by having an Apple license, the MFI license that was required. That's very much what the closed systems are trying to do. And we don't like that, because what it means is that somebody's making money out of everybody's product, regardless of whether they've had any involvement in the develop or construction of it, which seems unfair. So open source, on the other hand, so platforms like Open Things is one of the larger ones, and that's been used in smart metering, in the electrical industry, lots of other different metrology as well. That's completely open source. You can look it up, you can download the whole protocol, and you can deploy it onto the hardware that you've got. Okay. I think the other thing with open source is also it's the mindset as well as the actual physical protocol or the soft protocol. The mindset being that if a manufacturer wants to work with other platforms, they will. And if they don't want to work with other platforms, then they're not open source. They are very much closed. So for example, in my company, we have an API that's published on our website. It's self-service. Anybody that wants to integrate us can download our API, request an access token, which is self-service, and they can start receiving information from our products via the API, and they can also send information to us as well, because we are open source. Does that answer your question?
So, yeah.
Thank you. That was an interesting little comment about token, and people can sign up to the open source, download a token, and start receiving data from where?
So from our servers, basically.
Okay,
so,
and what sort of data?
So if they have an account, the data that's being generated by their smart devices, rather than outputting it to an app or to a web portal, you can actually output to an API so that you can use it to trigger other things. That's all it means.
So it's purely the same way that your products work. There's a request goes out, it says, we want to switch on the light.
So you're getting the raw request rather than the completed action, basically. And that's what I mean by an open API that just allows it to communicate with anybody. And that could be just a guy sat there with, a Raspberry Pi and a little bit of programming knowledge, or it could be another major commercial company that wants to integrate. And an example of that in personal experience is we got a phone call in January from Cisco Systems just saying, hi, we've just finished an integration with your platform. It's really good. Would you like to come over to our partner conference in Ireland in 2 weeks' time and present to all of our 200 of our partners? And they'd not even needed to contact us to do that integration because they just self-served off our website. Any other questions? Anything about selling and creating a channel for smart home? No? Yeah.
Sorry, I was just more wondering about the security of it, as in hacking and things like that.
Okay, so yeah.
So about securing it.
Securing your smart home, yeah, indeed. So it's a really good question, actually. So if you take something similar like an IP camera, we've all seen in the horror press, the Daily Mail probably, that people have had their IP cameras hacked because they haven't bothered to change the default password from password or admin, antisocial characters have logged in and been watching the home, seen that it's empty, and then robbed it. So security is very definitely high on everybody's agenda. And okay, we can try and educate people to change their passwords, but by and large, a lot of people don't, and hackers exploit things like that. So there are a number of things that can be done in terms of security to prevent attacks actually having having a catastrophic effect. And there's obviously two levels of catastrophic effect. Catastrophic effect on the homeowner, i.e., you know, have they actually had something in their house go very wrong as the result of an attack? But there's also the impact of their device being used to take down other networks in sort of DDoS attacks or distributed denial of service attacks because of unsecured IoT devices. I think now most manufacturers have recognised that this is incredibly important. So the web bit, if you like, is now very much running on the sort of 128-bit encryption, the bank standard encryption, if you like. But then there's a second level of encryption that's usually needed between the devices because they're often communicating on secondary radio protocols like Zigbee and Z-Wave, as I've mentioned. But they tend to be incredibly heavily encrypted as well. But also they are very localized. So those signals only travel a few meters, a bit like a Wi-Fi signal. So somebody would actually have to be very close, listening at the right frequency, right at the time that the device was transmitting or receiving to be able to intercept it in any way. And you know, I've seen evidence of that happening in the wireless alarm market, for example, whereby you can buy a device and sit close enough to somebody's house that when the homeowner presses the disarm button, you can nick the code and use it again. So that's been tackled by things like rolling codes. But it's fair to say that 5 years ago, security was probably, you know, third or fourth on the agenda of smart home products, a bit like IP cameras. And now I would say it's probably top, actually, of anything that anyone's doing. It's making sure that the system is absolutely secure.
Do the products fail safe?
Do they?
Fail safe. In other words, you've got a switch.
Yep.
And if it becomes faulty, does it fail to off?
Yeah, yes, again, a great question. So yeah, in the majority of cases, and certainly with all of our range, the default status is off because you don't want something being stuck on or coming on after a power cut, for example. You've assumed that it's gone off and then it comes back on with an on status and, you know, it just happens to be connected to a electric fire or something. So no, the default positions are pretty much, you know, universally off.
You said that these devices talk to each other wirelessly.
Yeah.
We've obviously got a number of customers who have Wi-Fi problems around their houses, and there are various solutions for that.
Yeah.
Are we going to run into problems when installing this kit in certain construction properties of these things just not being able to talk to each other?
Yes, almost certainly is the answer. But the good news is there are a number of things that are happening to make sure that happens as infrequently as possible, and also there are a number of solutions as well. So first and foremost, Wi-Fi, you know, is pretty much the scourge, to be honest, of radio communications in a property because, you know, I'm yet to meet a single person that thinks Wi-Fi is good. You know, generally speaking, it's flaky, unreliable, has a mind of its own, turns itself off when it fancies, and quite often, and this is the important bit, it requires a physical restart to get it going again. So, you know, if it stalls, you've got to switch it off and switch it back on again. And for a smart home product, that's kind of useless because you're not there when you want to switch it off, when you want to turn something on or off. So the majority of wireless communication in smart home products doesn't use Wi-Fi. So when I referred earlier to the standards that are being used, Wi-Fi is one of them, and there are plenty of single function standalone Wi-Fi products that are smart home products, like a simple smart plug. The Wemo by Belkin, for example, is one example. TP-Link do one as well, and they're very low cost. They run on Wi-Fi, and when the Wi-Fi stalls, they're completely useless. The benefits of you know, a more thought-out system that has some kind of gateway or hub that's using a different wireless protocol is much more stable and reliable. And those platforms like 433, 868, Zigbee, Z-Wave, because they're not such high frequency platforms or carriers, they propagate a lot better in a property. And typically they'll happily sail through, you know, through 30 meters, 100 feet of a house, through walls, doors and ceilings. You know, and yes, on the occasion where you're living in a converted stone church with 4 foot thick walls, that range is going to be reduced. Yeah. And similarly in certain construction materials where you've got very energy efficient properties like passive house, right, that have got dense aluminium particulate fillings in the walls, that will also attenuate the range. But because the frequencies propagate better than Wi-Fi in the first place, they're attenuated less than Wi-Fi as well. So I can sit in my own home, which is standard construction, masonry and timber. I can sit there with a decked phone, one of our smart home products, and a tablet or phone connected to a router. And as I walk out of the house and down the garden, the first to go is Wi-Fi, the second to go is decked, and the third to go is ours. So yeah, it's definitely a problem. I mean, we as our business get around it by being able to apply additional hubs to the same system, and our hubs are very low cost. Other solutions you probably already sell, such as range extenders, and of course the new mesh Wi-Fi, which I haven't had a go with yet, but I've read some very warm reports about. Okay, anyone else?
Is there, if your Wi-Fi does go down or whatever, can you use the device normally, like as a switch, just turn it on and off?
Yeah, so obviously if your internet goes down, or the Wi-Fi connection, but let's assume actually you're talking about the internet is gone. Most smart home products have some kind of manual function. So if it's a Nest Learning thermostat, for example, you can still just change the temperature on it. It's not redundant. Not entirely redundant. In our ecosystem of products, if you set things like timers for something to happen, so for lights to come on, even if the internet's gone, that will still happen because the hub product, the part of the system that's the brain, if you like, is still carrying on its normal functions. You just can't change anything. That's the thing. So you can't make a modification because you've got no connection to it. But generally speaking, smart devices carry on doing what they were told to do, other than Wi-Fi only ones, which by and large, if their Wi-Fi is gone, then they're redundant.
Not like the best option, does it, to be fair, the Wi-Fi on them?
Yeah, that's. I think that's a general consensus, to be honest. So they tend to just be very low-level consumer products anyway. Really, those.
Just you were talking about the control is actually in the gateway, and of course it is. I hadn't considered that. So, what's the limit? What's the maximum number of devices you can throw at a gateway?
So it completely depends on the manufacturer's product. Our product, we have 32 memory slots on our gateway, and each memory slot could just be one device, so therefore 32 devices. But for example, if you've got 3 lamps in a lounge that you want to behave collectively, i.e. they'll come on and go off at the same time, then that only uses one memory slot, for example. So if you did that with everyone, then you'd have 96 devices, but yeah, that's how it works. And that's the same for the majority of manufacturers' products, actually. They have a finite limit, but it's quite large, and you would struggle to test it.
Can you have multiple gateways in the same installation?
Yeah, you certainly can, yeah. So ours essentially become invisible, really. You only see devices, you don't see the gateways, and I know that that Hive, from British Gas, that also offers support for multiple gateways and multiple devices as well.
How well does the system work with multiple people using it? So, say for example, you've got something that comes on when you're only so close to home.
Yeah.
I've got 3 people who won't all be at home, and they're each controlling from the phone. Do I set it up for? Does it work for any of them? One of them?
So it's a great question, and again, that really varies by platform. Some platforms only allow one user, one device, and I guess that really keeps things very simple. You're under no illusion as to who's doing what and how a system's going to respond. In our case, we have a very simple set of parameters that just says, first home and last to leave. So the first person home, if you've set up a rule for on distance, it's the first person that triggers it. And if you set up a rule when you're leaving, then it's the last person that leaves that trigger it. Otherwise, if I got up for work at 5 o'clock and walked out the door, the house would all turn off on the wife and kids, and they won't be very happy. Okay, brilliant. Right, well, listen, thank you very much indeed for coming and hearing a little bit about smart home. I hope some of you have found it useful and begin the journey. So thanks very much for coming.